Welcome everybody to a brand new episode of James D Podcast Record Club, where one of us recommends a record for the others to listen to every single week. And this week we are talking about Tyler's recommended album, which is Emergency and I by the Dismemberment Plan. Tyler, what the fuck is a dismemberment plan, and what is this fucking emergency, and who the fuck is I?
All stellar questions, Jake, that I hope we can really get to the bottom of.
Of course.
Dismemberment Plan are a sort of Washington, D.C. based sort of indie rock / math rock band, one of the most kind of pivotal and influential of their time in the late 90s and early 2000s, led by the inimitable Travis Morrison, whose style and personality and lyrical acumen we'll talk about in great depth very, very soon. It's worth noting that this entirely by coincidence, we're reviewing this the exact week that the follow-up to this album, Change, turns 20. Was not intended. If I had known that Change was turning 20, I might have even had us review that instead, because while Emergency and I think is their masterpiece, Change is a very interesting record and a fascinating departure / development in its own way that maybe we'll talk about someday. But anyway, the reason why I recommended Emergency and I in the first place is that not all, but a lot of the record clubs that I've recommended this year have been albums that have been based like canonical teenage albums for me, like records that defined my burgeoning tastes in like rock music as a teenager and the things I've come to appreciate and love about music in general, trying to like paint a picture of that with albums that we've discussed, like Modest Mouse's Lonesome Crowded West, for instance. But anyway, this week it's about Emergency and I. And this is a really special and really unique album that I think it's fitting that we're finally reviewing, because I think this album has an appeal that's pretty difficult to deny. I mean, it's a hard record not to love if you love indie rock, if you love rock music in general, if you love your rock music with a heap full of generous helpings of personality and quirkiness and idiosyncrasy. D-Plan are about as unique a band as you can get in that mold, emerging around a sea of other great bands that had left a profound impact on childhood me, like Pavement and Built to Spill, but still doing their own thing entirely. And the other reason why I thought it would be cool to have in the record club, as well as just being a kind of canonical me record, is that as I said, it's a record that would appeal to all four of us in different ways, and indeed a record that has appealed to the four of us. And a big part of my reconnection with this record this year, it's always been in my life, but like with Los Campesinos' Hold On Now Youngster, which was a record club not that long ago, my current favorite record, like with that, it was important to me as a teenager, but I came to rediscover it this year in a new light and had an additional impact now that I've grown up a little bit more. And this had that too. And it was amplified by the experience of recommending this album to August, because I knew this would have an appeal to August. There's just a lot about the musical sensibility, as well as the writing style of Travis Morrison, that I knew would have an appeal to August. And indeed, I was right. It's one of the most, I would say, vindicating recommendations of an album I've ever made to someone. So I'd love, we'll get into the songs track by track, which I think is really the only way to approach a record like this, which is a classic where every song matters. But I want to ask you, August, first of all, to just talk about your experience with discovering this record through my recommendation and what this album sort of means to you and how you've connected with it.
Oh yeah, this was a fascinating tale, because this was when I had first listened to this because of you. I was like, okay, because you recommended this to me in like a DM between us, and I was like, okay, this has to be like some extra important thing, because normally this would just be a recommendation Tyler drops in the main chat, but specifically reaching out to me with this was like something where I was like, okay, there's something deeper here that I need to listen to. And I will not lie, on my first couple of listens, what I would consider my initial batch of listens before rating something, I thought it was good, but not amazing. But then I kept returning to the moments I thought were the very best on it. And I was listening to this for the brief time I was back in person in school last year. high school, that being. And I would listen to it in my free period of the day between my fourth and sixth hour. And I would listen to this album during that period. And I remember being just so distinctly enraptured in all in the songwriting, how colorful it was, and how just immediate it felt to my experience growing up and facing this rapid change in my life, which is obviously something that in the past months viewers of ours would be keen to observe has really been happening and impacting me. So we are now essentially in the aftermath of where this record has taken me. But then it was like, okay, I bumped my score up for the album a bit, and I was like, okay, now this is definitely a record I really enjoy. And I thought I would stop at that, but then I kept returning to it. It kept being this album that would speak to me in moments where I always felt unsure about myself or my decisions, the people I was around. It seemed to be an album that filled in those gaps and knew exactly what to say to me and how to say it. It is a record that carried me through my first relationship and even to the end of that and onwards. And it's something I just think has had this profound impact on my life and become just one of the most important pieces of art to me.
I resonate a lot with that. And I'm pleased that through me that has been able to be something that you've connected with and that has helped you in that way, because it's felt like a companion record to me in a lot of sort of similar experiences. Because this is an album that, I mean, at the end of the 90s, you were getting a lot of these kind of big opus records that were kind of like rock bands building off of a wave of, you know, experimentation in alternative rock that had kind of risen to the fore and pushed the sonic sort of boundaries of what sort of those sort of genres could be throughout the 90s, this progression that was constantly happening. And at the end of the decade, I think as a result of that, you had a lot of bands like Built to Spill, like Dismemberment Plan, and Radiohead, who were releasing these huge canonical albums that were representing the scope of how this independent alternative rock music had developed in these really ambitious ways, but also reflecting a kind of keen anxiety that was just starting to set in about the future in the late 90s, about the rise of technology, about sort of the uncertainty of the 21st century and what that would bring. And of course, all of this is exemplified by OK Computer, that seminal album that in the canon of popular music represents that as the thing. But to me, as much as I love that record and I think that record is perfect, I've always resonated just a little bit more with Emergency and I's particular slanted approach to that topic and the way in which it explores that, because of Travis Morrison's writing style and just the really playful aspect of the musicality of D-Plan. And what I love about Travis as a writer is that he's very emotionally forthright, but also like almost like intuitively just embedded within him is a talent to write poetically and communicate those feelings in a way that's just utterly startling and show-stopping without ever being overly flowery or obscure or, you know, difficult to understand. He's able to write, and he does this to utter perfection on almost every song on this record. He is able to write these or put into words, into lyrics, these feelings that will relate to an anxiety about the future, that relate to loneliness in the aftermath of a breakup, that relate to the just paralyzing, you know, crises that you can experience just as a result of getting older and having to, you know, come to grips with your relationship to the world, your independence within it, and how frightening all of it is. And to me, Emergency and I is as good an album as has ever been written and recorded about all of these feelings. it's remarkable. And I mean, there's only so much I can say as an overview, because you really have to dig into these songs, which we're just going to do. But I mean, I just wanted to preface it by saying that I'm pleased it's connected with you, August, and I know it has connected with Jake and Morgan to varying degrees as well, because it has that level of emotional just directness and connectivity, while also having the sense of like restless creativity and a desire to use a slanted lens on the most universal of themes and of human experiences to bring out their inherent absurdity and to bring us all closer together. And yeah, I think that's what this album does essentially in a nutshell. Jake, what are your general, I guess, thoughts on this record overall and your experience kind of discovering it?
I first discovered this album a long time ago because, it's obviously highly acclaimed, highly esteemed. It's a very highly rated album on Sputnik Music. And it was my introduction to math rock as a whole. And as a result, it was an album that I listened to and it was, towards my musical inception. And I was just sort of like, I kind of sat myself down and was just kind of like, I think I like this, but I also don't think I'm ready for this. I need to flesh out my musical taste a little bit more, just because I didn't feel like I had the frame of reference to truly appreciate it, just because I think I think one of the reasons that it's so difficult to, like Tyler said, there's only so much that you can really say as an overview for this album. And I agree with that, mainly because I feel like every single song here is such a singular, fully formed piece that it's not like 100% different from all the other songs on there, but each song structurally, lyrically, tonally, instrumentally, all of them are so distinct and so very, very singular that they become difficult to assign umbrella terms to. They all function completely different ways, so it's hard to broadly assess them in a way. Even its designation as math rock is not entirely applicable to every single song here, but it definitely does have the wonky ass time signatures and the that kind of sort of emo almost vocal delivery it's very distinct. And I think that initial lack of genre knowledge on my part led me to sort of the emotional qualities of the album kind of went over my head. So when Tyler started listening to a lot of D-Plan this year and started talking about it, and August started talking about it too, I was just that is an album that I need to revisit. And finally, when I revisited it, I fully got it and understood it, and it was so easily communicative, and every single song here just really it hit in a way that it hadn't before. But it was also just kind of finally getting to see the matrix of understanding why this album is as beloved as it is, because before it was my appreciation was a little bit more of a distance, and now it's an album that I fully connect with and love.
Morgan, what about you? You discovered this a bit more recently, but I know it's connected with you as well. I guess, what does this album mean to you, and what was the experience of discovering it like?
Yeah, basically got on board the Emergency and I hype train as it was rolling through the station, so to speak, in this last little bit of, everybody listening to it at the same time, more or less, and seeing that it was also an upcoming record club. And I decided to go ahead and give it a listen a couple weeks early. And it has since rocketed into 12th on my top 20 favorite albums of all time. Sometimes you hear a record like a classic and you're just like, I wish I had this when I was younger. And
Yeah.
Sometimes you listen to a classic and you're like, I ain't ready yet. And then rarer than either of those, I think, are records that hit you at exactly the right time in your life. And for me, being 21 years old, at his first semester back at a college he left once, sort of returning to memories but reshaping them and living them differently. Like for instance, I have one of my classes is in the same building in the exact same classroom as one of my classes from that very first semester. And that's a room I had never been prepared to be in again. So that was a surreal experience. But now I don't even associate it with that class at all, really. I associate it with the one I have now. So I think it's the way that so much of this album resonates with sort of being on the cusp of something, but also having so much to remember and look back upon fondly. And it balances those two things thematically so well that it just fucking hit. And, the fact that so many songs on this album are in like 7/4 time signature while also happening to be ridiculously earwormy. I like what an extraordinarily talented group of musicians. Fucking A.
100%. And I mean, let's just get straight into this fucking thing with A Life of Possibilities, the opening track of this album, the tone setter, and the, I guess, sort of establishing opening scene of this fucking mammoth.
A flawless song.
I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to be hearing me say that a lot, but yes,
Yeah.
100%. I mean, for starters, let's just talk about the experience, like the world this throws you into, like the weird kind of off drum pattern that starts in combination with that farty synth that I absolutely love. It sounds so like just kitschy and like it's kind of
Tinny
sucks,
synths.
it's kind of a
Which is-
shitty sound, but I love
that's
it.
admittedly kind of a constant in this album. The synths are terrible for the most
Yeah.
part, but that's what makes them so endearing and amazing and adds so much of the emotional weight, as we will get into with other songs.
Oh,
There's
100%.
even like some like drum machine stuff on this album that sounds like really purposefully stilted and like really kind of awkward, but it like it's so in keeping with the album sound that I don't know how it could
Yeah.
like bother me,
Because like when you approach this as a math rock record, then the kind of like moments where everything is kind of like stilted and within particular kind of like rigidity, that it all starts to kind of fit. And also there's just a kind of like flowing organic kind of like beauty to a lot of the guitar parts and bass parts as well, and vocal parts that makes it not feel too stiff. But like A Life of Possibilities is just this amazing pool of sounds, like, and yeah, you kind of alluded to it just before, Jake, but that like opening vocal melody where it's like
underground now.
like what is Travis doing? Like, why would you open your album with that kind of like
You
bizarre
can say that about
falsetto?
every fucking song here. He's so like, it's literally just the man doing funny Muppet voices.
Yeah,
And it's awesome.
and you get an immediate sense of like someone who could quite easily communicate in a very straightforward way, but it deliberately chooses to think outside the box in the way that he presents his lyrics, in the way that he considers himself as a kind of like instrument on the album, of a vocal presence on the record, and is just always doing something that is off or like weird, that fits in with the same sort of weirdness that everyone else in the band is channeling. Like, it's so unique, and that's what makes it so gripping straight away.
I love how like mechanical it sounds, and then it just sort of goes into that guitar passage. It kind of blooms into
Oh,
it, and it's
such a fun guitar passage because I've put this song on while walking at multiple occasions, and even if I'm by myself, I will just like dance and spin around to that guitar melody, because it feels like the moment before a title card pops up in a TV show theme song and the lead up to that.
Yeah,
it's
I know
so
exactly what you mean.
it's so intoxicating. I love it.
And the way it just kind of like the end of it just transforms into like a more straightforward but like really impactful rock song is just so fucking great.
Oh yeah, like when that final kind of riff comes in at the end, it's like straight, like totally unexpected. It has a weight like a heaviness to it that completely like upends the rest of the song and feels like this kind of cathartic explosion. The album has a lot of these moments where like songs will just explode. Like You Are Invited does this too, where it's like it'll just kind of explode at a certain point into a completely different sort of song and feel like it's this resolution of a tension. Because that's if you're going to describe this album with one word, tension would be a good word, because it is a record. Yeah, it is a record about existing in a perpetual state of fucking anxiety and that bubbling over every so often.
Wonder what that's like.
Yeah. Fuck
yeah,
right?
Fuck. Sure, right? The four of us can't relate to that.
And yet it's an album that has this, I mean,
right here socially awkward losers never.
Like it has this fucking anxious feel, and yet Travis, again, the writing I'm going to keep coming back to, it's beautiful.
Oh yeah,
like you dig down underground now through the soil, through the cooling clay, as the din fades above you, you're moving, you're secret, you're nowhere, it's all good. Like this whole image of just
aimless, it's mapless, no compass, no North
Star. Oh, and it's also such a brilliant call forward to the later sci-fi themes on this album.
Absolutely.
Of course, calling forward to 8.5 minutes.
Yes. Yeah, and just this idea of like immediately you're put into this world of like going underground, like going beneath the city, and to I guess to explore, to experience the silence, to be like, you know, distanced from the noise above you, and then eventually realizing that you have to go back up for air.
Not to make this comparison again, but it is very subterranean homesick alien.
Yeah, 100%. But like, I mean, Tom York couldn't write a lyric like, there's a feeling coming back connected by a thread. It's pulling at your hands like a spider web, like a kite that isn't there. The images that Travis conjures here, like the metaphors for either being trapped or for being anxious or for being kind of like overwhelmed, are so like unique and poetic and haunting. They're the kind of images that conjure a very like visual thing in your head and stick with you.
That line, Morse code tapped with hammers, is so evocative and sticks with me.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that whole. It reminds me of the line in Don a Man by Slint, like they had eyes like the heads of nails. Like that kind of vivid imagery is so powerful, and it's just kind of little nuggets of that are papered all over all of these songs. And it just absolutely fucking destroys.
Speaking of sci-fi concepts that pervade the album, Memory Machine.
Memory Machine.
Dream Machine.
White temple. Black wire. Left temple.
It's another whack-ass way to begin a song where it's just like all this like shit instrumentally is kind of like happening, and then you just hear red wire, left temple, black wire. And it's just like, wait, what? What are you fucking?
Yeah. Then it goes like,
there's dissonant guitars. Like again, I have to give credit to
like beeping.
I have to give credit to the producer on this record as well. I can't remember his name, but like the production on this record is quite rough. Like it sounds quite dirty and dingy, and it has a real kind of 90s feel to it, and it really elevates that kitschiness of the instrumentation and like some of the keyboards and synths that have been talked about, but also just like when they really like hammer these really dissonant like parts. And a lot of these songs have a lot of dissonance in them, and we're going to talk about one of my favorite examples of it very, very soon. But Memory Machine is just this absolutely bewildering song. As a kid, I didn't know what the fuck to make of this track. I just had to like, I couldn't fully process it. But
as a 23-year-old, I sometimes still don't really know how to, frankly.
I love the imagery in this track so much. It's so
one of the most heartbreaking songs on the album. I mean, it's a song about like it's an observation about humanity, about how we will gladly erase our most traumatic memories. We will gladly like dull ourselves and dumb ourselves down. We will gladly like, literally, what's the fucking word of when you get a part of your brain taken out? Lobotomize. We'll literally lobotomize ourselves, or metaphorically, I guess, lobotomize ourselves to like, and be content to exist in a dull state of being. And that makes that, you know, metaphorical idea of like having a lobotomy, it turns it into a kind of like literal science fiction concept with this idea of a memory machine that erases you, that, and again, these poetic words,
to wax our hearts to a blinding sheen, to wash away the grief.
Yeah.
God, I love that lyric.
Yeah. And like, and the bridge of this song as well, where he's like, if they can make machines to save us labor, someday they'll do our hearts the very same
that
favor.
Part is just crushing. I love that so much.
The wails of ruined lives brought to a halt by the serene hum of computers and air-conditioned vaults.
Oh God!
See, now
what a piece of imagery.
Tom fucking York lyric if I've ever heard it.
And that's very Tom York. Yeah,
that's horrific. Also, let's
just terrifying.
Just the idea of all of human consciousness being uploaded on this matrix-like vault that's just air conditioned and left there, and that's it. That's all.
The fucking vocal
is.
melody of there are folks that think to have a soul, you gotta suffer.
Well, lately I've had my RDA of that.
There's something, whatever he says.
Call it fascist.
Yeah, and it's like, it's, again, the writing is great because it's doubly devastating because Travis chooses to take the perspective of this person who is longing for that, who sees it as this kind of like utopian ideal, this ability to, you know, remove all suffering from your life and remove all meaning.
I think they see it as an out more than anything, which is equally tragic, that some event in their life has come to the point where that's the out they need and are seeking.
And they even acknowledge the, like, you know, the dystopian nature of it when they say, like, call it fascist, but I know that someday happy will be all that matters. Like, it's amazing how, I mean, not amazing, but like, it's still so fucking relevant and devastating. And then just again, the song is such a cacophony of sounds. The time you get to that climax, and it's literally just screaming it, red wire, right temple. Like, oh my God, you get the sense that it's happening, that the memory machine is doing its fucking like, it reminds me of like the final season of The Leftovers in certain respects, which I won't spoil, but it has a sort of not dissimilar kind of concept that's equally horrific. And amazing song. And then you get the
run continues.
The best song that fucking Third Eye Blind never wrote. What do you want me to say? It just has that fucking late 90s, not pop punk, but like, you know, that sort of energy of those kinds of bands. And yet,
I mean, I compared it to Weezer before we started recording, and I stand by that. The chorus to this just sounds like something that would be right off of Blue Album. And to just say this, I not to like blow my load too quickly or anything here, but this is my favorite song on the album. I fucking love this
like
song.
One of the most sort of beloved and like talked about songs on this record, I think. And like, again, what separates it from all these other bands, Weezer or whoever, is again the little idiosyncrasies and eccentricities of Travis and the band as performers. Like, who would come up with a vocal melody like, I lost my membership card to the human race? Like,
it's so discombobulating to listen to.
Yeah,
I love on this track because for the most part during the like verses, it's doing that kind of stilted guitar line, and then when you get to the chorus, it goes
good.
The way it opens up, like, and it opens up with that guitar like going like into that proper riff, and his vocals just soaring as he delivers that line as well. What do you want me to do? Like, you just did it, Jake, perfectly. Like, that's it. But I love as well, like, how like it's just in the verses, it's just like one dissonant note hammered again and again and again, like it's like so
the end of the chorus when he's like, hey,
and
I love that shit.
The way these choruses are written instrumentally is really interesting, and I've learned this by attempting to play a lot of their songs on like bass and stuff. The way they'll write these choruses is, so say there are 16 notes, rather than doing like a 4-4-4-4 chord change, it's like 7-9 or something weird like that, which gives it this like just slight uncomfort to it that really adds to and emphasizes the what they're going for.
Absolutely. It's so unhinged and off and wrong. And yet they managed to make this song that has so much weird, wriggly vocal melodies. And just, again, like, especially when you get to the second half of the song and they're literally just hammering that dissonant note over and over again. And Travis is doing that thing. Like,
that part's so weird.
It
Sorry,
it
I
works.
didn't quite catch it.
It works perfectly for a song. Like, the song is pretty much, to me, it's about like the visceral spirit experience of like having like really just a severe anxiety disorder, and just like, even the chorus, like, what do you want me to say, what do you want me to do, trying to fall in line with people so that they don't notice you, and talking about like social faux pas of like, when every joke I say is treason, like all of these things, like dwelling on the person that your anxiety has made you in the past and who you could be in the future and who you are now. And it's like, it's such an all-encompassing perspective of this that like it really rings true emotionally, but it's also just like, it's really, really thoughtfully constructed.
yeah, I mean, it's like the ultimate autism anthem in a lot of ways.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
I mean, that opening line, like, I lost my membership card to the human race, so don't forget the face because I know that I do belong here, is a great, like, iconic, but also like beautiful distillation of the feeling of the song and of the album as well, because it's not the only song that explores this feeling on the record. But yeah, it's just like, what I love about this record is it's able to communicate this kind of feeling in so many different ways. Like, to me, what do you want me to say? And a song like Spider in the Snow, which is the next track on the record, are kind of about very similar, quite related feelings. And yet they're entirely different songs with entirely different emotional approaches and sonic approaches to these feelings and ideas and subject matter. And you get a lot of this variation across the record, and it always keeps the album feeling fresh and invigorating, because you're never, even when you're exploring sort of similar themes of malaise or whatever, you're always looking at it from this new, weird, strange angle, peppered with this imagery that's always so gut-wrenching and striking. I mean, Spider in the Snow. I mean,
what the fuck is the instrument at the beginning of this? Is it like a fucking harmonium? What the fuck is it?
It sounds like a mellotron or something like that. I think it might just be
it's like a really crappy mellotron or something.
It sounds so sad.
Our friend Connor has sent us the like liner notes as to what it exactly is.
Yeah, he did, didn't he? And I can't remember now, but I
can't remember. It was something like a dollar store Casio keyboard or something.
Yeah, that's the
like
thing.
that.
It does sound really cheap as well, but it has that sadness that Jake, you've mentioned. Like, it has that sense of like, you're before any part of the song is even kicked in, you're immediately like, you know, you're feeling that emotion. Like, and I just, the fucking beat here, like the pulse of this track, the rhythm section. I mean, we've alluded to how great these instrumentalists are. I'm going to mention them by name. So bassist Eric Axelson and drummer Joe Easley. I mean, they have so many places to show off on every song on this record, but I think when Spider in the Snow starts and that that kind of little rhythm that I've just really badly onomatopoeied comes in, you really get a sense of the weight of their role in the band and what they bring to these arrangements. Obviously, you get them, they're a very key part of those last three tracks, but I wanted to bring them in here and emphasize them because they're so key. And this track is in 7/4 for starters. Lots of weird time signatures on this record. Yeah. This is barely even the weirdest, but it has what I love about the use of time signatures, specifically the use of time signatures that take a beat off of a normal time signature, like 7/4, which, you know, if it's just like, you know, 8/4 would be, you know, anyway, it just takes a beat off. So what that does is it syncopates the song such that a measure is happening sooner than you expect it to, as in the development of the musicality of the song. So that just adds the sense of like juppity, uppity sort of anxiety to the arrangement, because you're being kind of jolted with each iteration of the main rhythm. And that's something the band do to great effect across this record. But It just speaks to how what they do as musicians is not just, hey, let's do something cool and funky and weird for the sake of it, but let's actually do something cool and funky and weird and design it using our musical knowledge to accentuate the feeling of the song.
Make it purposeful, which is purposeful is, I think, one of the best words to describe this album, because none of what it's doing is random bullshit. There is a point, an idea. There's a really just great sense of understanding to what they're constructing and like an end goal in mind in every one of these songs. That's very apparent.
Yeah, and I know this is a song that you have quite an attachment to, August. Why don't you sort of speak about what the significance of this song is?
I mean, essentially, this is just one of the most heartbreaking anthems to uselessness, repetitiveness, and malaise that's ever been written, I think. This opening verse, gosh, those lines, the only thing worse than bad memories is no memories at all.
Which calls back, obviously, to Memory Machine as well.
To Memory Machine, absolutely. And from the age of 20 to 22, I had 5 friends, none of whose names I can recall. And yeah, gosh, it doesn't. And what becomes apparent is that this song is kind of a reflection on the past and almost a yearning. And it's like this reflection on like, well, the past has always sucked, but then what kind of throws you off is the second verse, which shows that our character has really grown nowhere from where he was. He's back into this repetitive, stagnant place in his life. Oh gosh, and just the similar alley, different rats, and commenting on the trash goes out on a Tuesday now. Oh my gosh, it's just these minor little things he has to notice to keep him engaged and present in the world he's living in. And then we get the principal metaphor of a spider in the snow. First off, this chorus is amazing. It sends chills down my spine every time I hear it, without fail, and wells up my tear ducts, incidentally. And this metaphor of a spider in the snow. So like a spider stereotypically black and just this complete contrast in the snow, useless, unable to move around. There are no insects for it to catch in its web. In what seems like an endless winter is such an impactful metaphor for loneliness and uselessness. It really does just break my heart completely, and then we just keep going with it, and there's just almost a shred of comfort to it in the way this chorus is delivered, with the "you can't say it, but I know that it's in there. You don't know it, but I know that you're scared." This almost like Travis is reaching out to you personally as the listener, and almost giving you a hug in a sense after this just horrendous loneliness and uselessness, and just telling you you're understood in a way is about as powerful as a song can get. I think I love this song. It's the best thing on the album, and if I keep talking, I'm going to make myself cry.
Yeah, it's I like that you point out the second person nature of it. That the song is Travis sort of essentially reaching out to a person or to the listener ostensibly,
or to the listener.
Yeah, and it gets more devastating as it goes on. Like the lines, now you find the very same pit still yawns down deep down within the very same gut. This idea of like using this imagery of a gigantic sort of monster that you're deep inside as a kind of representation of existence. The very same ghosts still seem to haunt you down. Those lines you always tried to cut. You thought you just might need a little change, and now you find you got nothing but.
Oh my gosh, that kills me.
And then a very, very OK Computer-esque line: how can a body move the speed of light and still find itself in such a rut? Like, and that's, I think, encapsulates what the song is about to me, which is obviously not, in contrast to August, but just in addition to what August was saying. But like the way in which, as you get older, your relationship with time and aging changes, the way that years kind of feel like you're losing them and become blurred together and indistinct. Like that notion of from the age of 20 to 22. I had 5 friends, none whose name I can recall, because when you do get to, I'm only 24, but when you get to this point, it's sort of like there's no meaningful distinction between when you were 20 and when you were 22. Like there's a meaningful distinction between when you were, 16 and 14. It all starts to just kind of spiral into this haze. And that's what the song is about, I think. And
yeah. And I was thinking so much about that. It's so funny you mentioned that in that context, particularly because I remember being awake on my birthday just recently and thinking about this line and the ramifications it had, because you're absolutely right that there is that additional commentary to the just forward progression of time, and that being this unstoppable ghost as it's described.
Yeah, and I think, it gets even more devastating with the Jitters for me, which comes in. It's almost like, Spider in the Snow is such a fucking devastating song that it's almost like unfair that the Jitters comes after it, because the
real black Jeremy hours.
Fuck, that's exactly it. That is exactly it to me.
You're spitting.
The Jitters is a song that has grown to be one of my favorites on the album over the years, after an initial experiences with it, where I connect. As a teenager, like one of my most vivid experiences of listening to this record for the first time was hearing lines like, always tired, need a nap, I have to make myself brush my teeth. Like, I just like, fuck, he's speaking to me. This is me. You're describing me. And I was like fucking 15, 16. And he's describing the experience of being 10 years older than that. And there are certain aspects of this record where, as a 16-year-old, I could instantly connect with it. And other aspects of this record where I couldn't connect with it. And it was held at a distance. And now, as I've aged, I've connected with it more and more. But the Jitters, to be honest, is like, one of the most kind of universally devastating and just direct and blunt songs on the record. But also, like, again, it has this poetic imagery throughout it. Like, no one means what they say, and you can tell as clear as deep sea fish, all internal organs and glowing eyes. Like this idea of viewing people around you not as people, but being so disconnected from them that you see them as just kind of like, forms that have glowing eyes that are burning into your skin when you look at them. And it's
that, continued sci-fi imagery once again of this horrific body horror, which is even accentuated in like plastic cube filled with pus.
The feeling of ice on the inside of the wrist. Like, I don't...
what the fuck are we even talking about?
I haven't experienced the feeling of ice on the inside of the wrist, but I know exactly what he means when he says it. And just like, this is one of the best songs ever written about depression, I think, in the sense that, or at least like one of the most, I think, effective, because it simulates the dullness of being depressed. Like, a lot of people focus in on just the agony of being sad. But this is a song that beautifully distills the dullness of depression. And it does that
mundanity.
The mundanity of it, like the sense of stilled time and like malformed time. And also just, again, you've had all these crazy rhythms and riffs and all these kind of shit going all over the shop on the tracks before this. But this is just much more restrained, a simple kind of guitar melody. You have these just fucking gorgeous Radiohead-esque guitar like scraping sounds, like those ringing, so like arpeggio sounds that kind of hang over the song at certain points. Very Modest Mouse actually, and also alongside Modest Mouse would be very influential on a band like Brand New and a song like Jesus Christ, which has a similar vibe as this track to me.
Oh God, yeah.
But the way the song kind of does that sort of repetitive loping guitar line, and then it gets to the chorus, and it's just the most deflated fucking melody and sound in the world. Like the Travis sounds essentially robotic when he sings it. When the days bring nothing new, like he's doing this kind of like weirdly
You've got the
snide.
jitters.
Yeah, and that fucking dissonant note that they hit with the jitters, like it's so unpleasant. It's skin crawling. And yet it's perfect for
the
what the
only
song's doing.
song I can think that has replicated the tone of this song is another Dismemberment Plan song, which is Automatic.
Oh, yeah.
And I think perfectly hits the same tone as this. So,
yeah.
I mean, listen to Change.
Yeah, I mean, Change is like essentially a record full of songs that have a very similar sort of vibe to the Jitters like that. It's less chaotic and more sort of just like, you know, morose. But yeah, I mean, the line that really fucks me up though, every time I listen to the song is actually there's two lines. The first is nothing's wrong, I'm just fine.
Yeah,
I realized I just don't like jokes. Like that moment you have when you just realize that fuck, I'm fundamentally fucked. Like I'm fundamentally fucked up in the sense that I should be experiencing an emotion or responding to this thing that's happened in a normal way, and yet I can't experience that.
They lean away when you just want to talk. You couldn't buy their interest now.
I mean, I've been on the highway listening to this, and I just want to go woo.
Yeah, and
it's
again,
just that moment of what if
I did? Yeah, like. And at the end of the song, is so fucking haunting. Like I get fucking chills listening to it when he says they glow as they near, then disappear like highway signs on a starless night. And it's so hard to say who's being fled and who's in flight. Like
God.
And the way the song kind of just deconstructs at the end into this weird, just eerie sounds. I mean, fuck.
I have literally obtained the jitters from the end of that.
Once again, this other horrifying kind of almost sci-fi almost piece of imagery that just to me always evokes like just these like almost alien ships just taking off and disappearing. It's so it's gosh, skin crawling.
Yeah. And then you get fucking I Love a Magician. Oh, here we go again.
Just fucking immediately.
And this is a great example of like the dichotomy of the album as well, because it gets at the emotional state of being like utterly, you know, dulled and depressed with songs like The Jitters and Spider in the Snow. And it also gets like the opposite side of that coin of the emotional experience, which is the fucking frenzied anxiety and the just fucking like the inability to act like a normal human, like your perceived inability to be, and you're just kind of like constant tension and being really bad at like socially engaging with girls, with people in general, but like there's a sexual element to these songs that's quite kind of key to a sexual frustration element that feels very channeled from like David Byrne, but like made into like late 90s like slacker rock style stuff. I Love a Magician's a very irreverent song. Like it'd be easy to like discard, like to write it off, but there's a lot of fun shit happening in this song. There's a lot of creative musical wildness happening in this song. There's the most alien vocal performance from Travis where he sings like, she simply wiggles her nose and disappears on my clothes. Really makes me wonder. Like the way he sings that is so fucking just
and then he like goes to the completely opposite end of the spectrum on this same song and like for once kind of sounds like a remotely normal human being on other parts.
Yeah. I mean, and yeah, it's just like a song about feeling like completely, like a fucking
just-
marionette in your social engagements.
Just completely frazzled, and
Yeah, and just at the
everything's out
whim
of
of
your
the people
control.
around you, and
Oh, it's good. It's
Yeah.
I mean, admittedly, I think it's a perfectly understandable reaction if initially you're a little turned off by this, because it can seem like an inessential moment, but I think it's a fun little reprieve from what follows, or from what comes before, I guess.
No, absolutely. It's a great, like, it's an ideal sort of like middle of the album, like end of side A, sort of like final sort of burst of energy before the second half of the album kicks in and immerses you. Like, I love, incidentally, just one little detail of the album I love is like the songs don't have transitions per se, but like when one song ends, it feels like it's just crashing into the start of the next song, and it's just like has such a sense of flow to it that you could never like hit pause or stop the album, because there's just such a like sense of forward momentum. And the way that I Love a Magician just kind of like careens to its end, and then boom, you're immediately hit with the sort of like keyboard Casio preset drum machine beat of You Are Invited, is like, it's just a perfect bit of like whiplash that I love so much. But yeah, You Are Invited. Which I'm
Jinx.
curious to get some takes on this song, because this is a song that I struggled to connect with a lot when I was a lot younger, because it's kind of like, well, first of all, half of it is much more restrained. It has that sort of more colder, like I guess kitschy aesthetic. But also the main thing is that it's kind of a parable song, where it's kind of a story that's told, and the kind of point of the story, or the meaning of the story, or the significance of what happens is really entirely up to the interpretation of the listener. And so I'm curious to hear from any of you guys, or all of you, what you think, sort of when you listen to the song, what the song is about to you, and like what you think the story, the significance of the story that's told in this song is. Because I have my own sort of thoughts,
Yeah,
but I'm curious if people have different interpretations of it.
I guess how I've personally read the song is that it's essentially about taking charge of one's own life, and essentially with the idea of this letter coming in the mail, and initially our protagonist thinks nothing about it, but because he decides to check it out, he has this like interesting, unique experience that is kind of reflected in the drum beat changing up and getting more exciting and interesting as it goes along. I take it as this kind of, call to action, call to get it, taking charge of your own life, as I say, getting in shape and just doing what's best for you. And that ultimately isn't necessarily what our protagonist needs at this time in his life, as kind of reflected in the last verse, but then he enables someone else and gives them the power to take charge of their life by giving them the invitation.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I think it's just about confidence, and how it's so much of the time someone with severe anxiety ends up just roadblocking themselves. And if you could just sort of pretend that somebody gave you an invitation to do the things that you want to do, then you could kind of get over yourself, and they would be easier, and things are probably going to be okay. Like the club that would supposedly wouldn't have him in a million years, or when he walks up to his ex and apologizes for being there, but she's totally cool about it. You know, we, as in the general GAD community, have a tendency to catastrophize and just automatically think the worst of something, like that club's not going to have me, I'm not nearly cool enough to be in there. But just show up to the club, they're not that particular. Or just like go to your ex's party, because if you're not weird about it, they're not going to be weird about it. So just don't be weird about it. I don't know, I find it a very cathartic song in that way.
Yeah.
I like
Jake,
how
what do
kind
you
of
think?
structurally it kind of like it has that sort of plotting minimal stuff in the verses, and then it does that blossoming kind of guitar thing of the "you are invited." That part is like that's the cathartic part for me, is that it's like it's musically demonstrating the idea of like, the anxiety, the tension, the ticks, and then it's like that burst of confidence that comes in to get you through it. And it is kind of like, it's sort of mundane. The party, he says it isn't that great. It's like it's just sort of like confronting the reality of the experience of just being like, the thing that you're probably building this up to be, this like big scary event of the social gathering, it's probably not that big of a deal. And hey, it might even be kind of lame. And it sort of examines that in a really like real way. And I really like how it's just sort of like it kind of calls back to the themes of the first song, Life of Possibilities, of just like the invitation that's doesn't say who it's from or where it's to go. It's like, the kite without a string or the kite without is that what it was? Kite without a string? Kite that isn't there. That's the one. But it's like it's a callback to that, in the sense that it's like you end up realizing that it sort of falls back in on itself, and it's like, oh, I'm the one guiding myself here.
Mm. Yeah, one aspect of the song that I really love is that it's like it feels very true to life in the way that the protagonist responds to the situation, like this idea of like being told it's okay to come here, we want you to come here and do whatever you want and just be present forever. And the way he initially responds to that, like it seemed like a really dumb joke, like, and that feels true to me in the sense that when you are someone who has pretty severe anxiety and people tell you it's okay, it's going to be fine, it's actually okay, and we want you to do all of this, it's like it's very difficult to take that seriously. Your brain doesn't let you take that seriously. Your brain reduces it and makes you think, well, they're just saying that, or they're not really understanding emotionally where I'm coming from. They're just trying to placate me. And I feel the song understands the feeling of how people who are anxious or who are depressed respond to the notion that things could be better. It's that we try and reduce that notion, we try and find reasons not to believe it. And I like the ambiguity in the song and the way the narrator actually feels about his experiences as a result of this invitation, the extent to which it's actually affecting his life, the extent to which it's actually going to stay with him in the future, or going to affect the way that his life changes. Maybe it will. I like Morgan's optimistic kind of interpretation that, it's a call to, take advantage of opportunities and not let them slip. But I like that there's a kind of ambiguity in the song that you could interpret the protagonist's response to this situation in a number of different ways. It doesn't feel like it's trying to tell this really two-dimensional, like moral of the story is, it's kind of just putting an idea out there and letting you think about it. And that's what I like about the song. It comes at the record at this interesting point where you've had all these kind of songs that have this really kind of vivid imagery, but are, otherwise quite songwriterly in terms of just being, typical songs. But here you actually have a story that's being told to you that you come away from thinking about it and applying your own sorts of interpretations to it. And yeah, like, has also been said as well, there's a great relationship between the tension and that kind of drum machine sound and the way that builds, and that sound that comes in. I think in the second verse it sounds like a fucking sped up sample of a crosswalk sound, and the way that explodes into the radiant chorus. I think it's an awesome song that doesn't quite get discussed enough, and I thought would be cool to unpack a little.
And the phone rings, and it's my mother.
Morgan had to dip, so we will continue without him, but obviously we will share his thoughts and enthusiasm for the coming songs. Next up on the record is Gyroscope, which for a long time was my favorite song on this record, and now the fact that it's like barely even in the top half tells you about the journey I've had with this album and the number of different songs that have been my favorite.
And it's still so good.
This track is fucking, it's like
It's
musical
nuts.
candy.
It's nuts. It's so awesome.
it's like that ballistic math rock crazy aspect of the D-Plan sound distilled into its most kind of like to its greatest demonstration.
Just that drum pattern is so memorable and gets stuck in your head so easily. And like that extra bar they add in that the drummer adds in just to like kind of fuck around and be like, yeah, I can do this. Why not? It's fun and it's so catchy. It's so memorable.
Yeah.
And it's executed with perfect precision throughout the entire track.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's with purpose again as well. Like this is this is a song again about being brokenhearted, about being kind of, in a shit state of mind, about being fucked over and fucked up and trying to hold yourself together. And the idea of representing that with the image of like a spinning gyroscope, where like pretending, again, it's like this representation of a human with an object. And it's like this idea of, if she spins fast enough, then maybe the broken pieces of her heart will stay together. This idea of like, if I put everything into this, if I like devote all of my energy into not falling apart, maybe I'll be okay. But of course, the realization that you can't do that forever, like that's not sustainable.
And of course, that's like reflected in the verses where we see these characters, including the listener themselves, who are kind of presented as being bitter and sad and unfulfilled. And yeah, it kind of shows how that's not healthy or sustainable, as of course Tyler's mentioned. And yeah, I think it's and it also kicks ass.
Yeah. Like the tension in those verses, like she's wearing too much lipstick tonight, a little black dress, like, a little too tight. Little details that tell you like beautiful picture of this person, this character who's like intensely anxious about the arrival of her ex at this party, and she's like, she hates being there, she hates the experience, she hates wearing heels, she tries to stand, but the room seems to bend and reel. Her friends will keep asking, why can't she just deal? Like, again, vocal melodies are not so crazy, but also like writing is vivid, it's impressionistic, it gets you right into that scene, and then the chorus explodes and it's like this whole fucking like release of energy, of tension.
Travis Morrison should have been a rapper.
I mean, he could do it.
He could.
White boy may indeed have bars. I mean, it's yes. This chorus is just so infectious and so fun and so like sing along worthy, but also like just not so crazy,
not so complex. Also, where you singing along will fuck up the words, but it's going to be fine because you're just having fun with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I can't get enough of like Travis's beautiful detail of like the experience of these two people. Like the boy in the second verse, I love the change in perspective to the ostensibly, or at least we're led to believe, I mean, I interpret it as the person that the girl in the first verse is anxious about seeing, and it's sort of like about how they're distant and they're like, estranged from each other and ostensibly broken up, but yet and then don't feel any kind of like attachment to each other anymore, and yet they're internally within each other having the same sort of emotional experience and like the same sort of like tension and anxiety and relief in some respects as well, especially for the boy in this story, but also again being in the same state of mind where he needs to put all of his energy, he needs to be the gyroscope in order to keep himself together. And then you have like Travis as the narrator kind of like pulling the story together, and the final lines of the song where it's almost like he gives you this kind of like moral, like happiness is such hard work, but it gets hard and it gets harder every day and it can kill you, but no one wants to be that tacky about it. Like it's a really sort of tongue-in-cheek kind of like moral of the story, poking fun at that trope. And then he invokes the chorus lyric again to say, if you spin fast enough, then maybe the broken pieces of your heart will stay together, but something I've seen lately makes me doubt it. It's just such a cool end to the song. The energy in this track is just a million. Like it's in this crazy like 15/16 time signature, I think, which I absolutely love because
it's something
it's
so erratic.
like we talked earlier about, I think I can't remember which song it was. I think a Spider in the Snow, where it was like they took an eighth note out of the beat, I think, to like syncopate it. And here it's like they do that sort of trick again, except it's with a 16th note. So it's like the syncopation is even more subtle. And it's not in every bar, but it's mostly like in the verses. And it's so subtle that it's like you might even miss it, that syncopation, the first couple times you listen to the song if you're not looking out for it. But like you can tell when the fourth sort of bar like ends to one sort of 16th note too soon, and it just, again, it keeps that energy on this kind of frazzled level of tension, and it's just A++ shit. Then we have the city, the fucking song that I have,
the monolith at the kind of center of this, not center like track list wise, but center as in this is the fucking song everyone talks about.
Yeah, it's like I'm trying to think of a comparison. It's kind of like, would you say it's like they're let down? If I keep coming back to OK Computer comparisons, but like it kind of feels like the let down of this record, or maybe that's the Jitters, and this is maybe like the fucking
no surprises
even potentially, but like it's
I
this completely
could
it's
work.
its own beast completely, because like even within instrumentation, but also like the tone of it is, I mean, like with a record like OK Computer, like even in its darkest moments you feel like there's this kind of glimmer of solace, maybe not hope, because maybe hope is the wrong word, especially for a song like no surprises. It's not a hopeful song, but it's almost like there's a sense of like twisted sad solace in being kind of like, beaten down and dying even. Whereas this is a song that I would describe as despondent. Like it's a song that's just about feeling utterly hopeless, and not, in contrast to something like the Jitters, it's not a kind of dulled, empty inside feeling. It's a fucking howl of anguish that this song represents. It's like, it's that scream of, now all I ever say now is goodbye, and the way that he just hangs on that and just screams it over and over and over again. It is, of course, Morgan, sadly no longer with us in this episode, had to leave, but it is, of course, the line that he has rendered iconic in his own way. It is the "Since you've been gone." That's the thing. Like it's not just about malaise anymore. It's about loneliness. It's about isolation. It's about the protagonist's relationship to the people in his life, as well as the relationship to the city itself, what the city represents, the way in which the city brings him down, the deadness of it all. Again, like the way the scene is set on immediately with now I notice the street lamps hum. Like immediately, like you're in this devastated state that makes you more attuned to these mundane details. Like I imagine someone who is like just drunk out of their mind, like waking up on the sidewalk and noticing the hum of a street lamp in the middle of the night, the ghosts of graffiti they couldn't quite erase. You get a sense of the infrastructure, the buildings, the actual landscape, the blank-faced stares on the subway as people go home. The parks lay empty like my unmade bed. That's one of my favorite like visual similes on this whole record.
And then you've got this that synth melody that's so killer.
Yeah.
And that melody is like 50% of what I think makes this song so effective, because it's this just gorgeous tone that's so distinct to this record and sound, and just so, it's so pretty. I love it.
Yeah, it's like that's that D-plan weird kind of like fuzzy wriggly tone that perfectly gets you on edge, as well as keeping the song having this energy. Jake, I mean, I know you love the song. I mean, what about it resonates with you, I guess?
I mean, it's just one of the band's most fully formed tracks. I love. I also the synths definitely don't sound like traditionally great, but it is like the closest they come to sounding like normal. And I think the way that they're put into like the instrumental feels tightly interlocked. That there's something so purely observational about the lyrics and the way that you relate an environment to either the presence or absence of somebody, and how it can completely fundamentally alter your worldview or just how you see this particular place. And it paints it as this distinctly, like, there's all this like science fiction sort of imagery about the city, and or not the city, of everything else on the album. And then in the city, you sort of have this, like, talking about the hum of the street lamps and stuff, all these very mechanical, very robotic observations about it. It's like depriving it of the ghost in the machine, as it were. And it's just, that fucking since you've been gone, it's fucking,
Yeah, it
you're
really
nothing, Kelly Clarkson.
you really get a sense of how lifeless this city is, like,
Yeah.
to him, like the like, and also I love that it's actually not technically like a breakup song. It's just a song about being left alone, like someone has left and you're in this environment and they're gone, and you feel like all you ever say now is goodbye. And that's heartbreaking, because it's like, it's not just that, all you ever say is goodbye. It's the notion that people in your life are moving forward and you're not able to. You're stuck. You're locked into a place that you don't want to be, whether it's a physical place or whether it's a stage in your life. And you're seeing, it's like you are seeing everything move so much faster around you, and you're standing so still, and you're unable to connect with or touch or even reach out to everything, because it's all moving so quickly and you're just there. And that's the feeling at the heart of the whole record, is that disconnect, right? That sense of complete not belonging, and feeling like you're held back from some great understanding or great, life that everyone else may be having. And I've thought about this a lot this week, and I think that the second verse of this track is probably, I can't think of a set of lyrics that I love more than these. I'm just going to read them. Sometimes I stand on my roof at night and watch as something seems to happen somewhere else. I feel like the breeze will pick me up and carry me away, out and over the iridescent grid, up and away from the bar fights and neon lights, and out and away from everything that makes me what I am. I mean, sometimes, I hope that Travis Morrison wrote that and took the week off. Like, that to me, like, I couldn't express, there's no point in describing the power of those lines, because that is the most potent description of the feeling that is getting at. There's no point in trying to disentangle it. It's just gorgeous. And then the fucking at the end of the song, when he just kind of like, the vocal gets more manic and he's like, oh, I never had just whatever it is you want, baby. And I really tried with all my might, it made me crazy. Like, when that part comes in, oh.
It hurt. Pain.
I
every
feel
day.
deep pain inside of me.
Yeah.
Like, that to me, when he's singing that is the most despondent. Like, that's as despondent as I've heard a human being sound on a song. Like, you can feel the pain. And again, it's just like the way that the song rises and rises and rises until that final goodbye. And it's just hanging on that sound, that bye sound, until it barely even sounds like a word. It just sounds like a fucking scream. It's just...
Yeah, it's a lot.
And in many ways, the record benefits from, pulling you back from fucking brink of suicide at that point with Girl O'Clock, which is again,
if I don't have sex by the end of the week, I'm
going
going
to
to die.
One of the most outwardly just hilarious songs.
Oh, 100%. Like, it's very much of a piece with I Love a Magician, not just in the irreverence of it, but also in the theme of like kind of neurotic sexual anxiety. And I just want to shout out fucking Joe Easley's drumming here in particular as well, where he's kind of
like some jazz drumming shit.
Like
it's crazy.
It almost sounds like it's the fill he's doing has just been sped up. Like it's just like it feels unnaturally fast, and it's almost out of step with like I love how Travis is barely trying to like be on beat or anything. He's just kind of like happening. Like it's just a song that feels like it's in motion as soon as it starts. The different members of the band are just doing their shit, and it's just all happening together. And that you know, not only the lyrics, but like the decision to stutter them like that. Like it's such a great little bit of, again, it's not just about Travis's lyricism and the sound of his voice. It's just about like what he does with his voice as well. Like the way he uses his voice in an expressive way to add to the lyrics. Like I can't imagine listening to the song without the stuttering. Like if you're gonna sing along to this track, if you're gonna cover it or whatever, you have to like be prepared to nail that detail of the way that he sings. And just the part was like, and you don't know all these urges can be so very, very misread. Like that shit is so fucking nuts.
Oh, it's great. I mean, it's really this because this is a track that feels in a great way that it's kind of, in a sense, mocking this kind of mindset it's putting in front of you, where it's like this is ridiculous and unmanageable.
Yeah.
And I think it's really funny in that sense of just being completely off the wall.
It's like Travis is doing a caricature of himself, and it's like a self-mocking sort of thing. Like he's really like making you see him as this kind of like, you know, stereotypical like geeky specky motherfucker who like can barely handle, like it's so cartoonish. Like the chorus is just him going whoa, 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 oh no. Like it's just so, you know, over the top, and I love
and
that.
It's having fun with itself, which is so nice and refreshing after death.
Yeah, after you've passed into the next realm. And I love the little moment near the end where he's like, you know, it's tick-tock, you don't stop. And
oh, that part's so funny. It never fails to get me. Wow, it's like that same dissonance he uses before in the record for like this, in the Jitters, for like this just emotional like soul emptyingness, and here he uses like ostensibly the same technique to be fucking hilarious, and it's great.
And like I love the way he does this on multiple songs on the record, like Gyroscope's another one where the song will end just very suddenly with a very funny line that's a lyrical motif that he then throws an unexpected twist onto. And so like the way he ends with like, if I don't have a nervous breakdown by the end of the week, I'm going to be very, very surprised. And then the song's just over like that. Like it's just a great, like, I love when the songs just kind of like end and then the next one is just started, and it's just like it's a whirlwind. And 8.5 minutes as well. Like this song, it might be easy to overlook. It's a sort of deep cut penultimate track, less kind of doesn't call attention to itself as much. But this song, this song's fucking, it's dark as fuck, but it's also like really blackly comic and funny and cool. And some of the lyrics here are just, we're already waxed lyrical about the lyrical quality here, but these are so great. Like, launched all the world's nukes this morning, hoping it would kickstart something. Some of them went off course and hit the moon instead. It was kind of pretty. like just the ending on that, it was kind of pretty. the lyrical callback to Life of Possibilities with going underground, we better start digging. And the again in the second verse as well, like just the idea of like these the absurdist images. Like I saw an astronomer break down on CNN.
Down on CNN.
I'm a scientist, not your
Just
fucking
not
clergyman.
fucking clergyman. And it's delivered exactly like that.
Yeah, and it's like this is contrast between those moments, and then like they give the power plants 10 days. The sky is like a dome of black metal flake, and stars bleed together in phosphorescent lakes, and a dead black disc slides silently overhead. It's fucking beautiful is what it is.
What it is.
And that chorus as well, like it's not just like the absurdity of the apocalypse, but like what you would do in those final moments. And
it's in a sense, it's a song about the apocalypse, but it's also not a song about the apocalypse. Especially emphasized in that chorus, kind of breaking down just what someone would do and what people do, like with fleeting moments in time where you really have to self-reflect and examine yourself and are at this like crucial turning point in your life.
Yeah.
And I think that's beautifully conveyed. And it's only like this small teensy part of this grander song.
And it's like, it's beautiful because it's like, it's true to the rest of the record in the sense that, it's about the absurd nature of reality, but it's also about like how we emotionally respond or don't emotionally respond, how we emotionally shut ourselves off from engaging with, how we shut ourselves off from engaging with our emotions or with the people around us. Like, to me, this song has a similar sort of impact thematically as like You Are Invited, which is a song about like, you know, where the ostensible theme is like, how, to what extent do you take advantage of the opportunities you have in life to engage with people, and what's keeping you from doing that? And this sort of chorus, I think, is exploring a similar sort of idea of like, we choose not to engage with, you know, dealing with difficult relationships or engaging with people because it's difficult to do that, and it's easier to ignore that. And
I mean, even the opening of the song is kind of reflective of that, with just launching all the nukes, like, fuck it, let's take the most extreme irrational approach.
Yeah, and I love that actually, because that's right, you could read that as like totally metaphorical of like, I launched all the world's nukes in the sense that I finally just decide to fucking blow my life up, you know, to do some fucking thing that I've been catastrophizing about for ages, and you know, and just kind of like marveling and I've fucking done it now, and then it's just fucking
and just seeing what happens.
Yeah, exactly. Like the sense of like when something, you know, calamitous happens and your response is not like panic, but just like laughter or like fucking, you know, you just kind of like, there's a relief and sometimes there's a relief in like tragedy, or there's a relief in like a disaster, because it frees you in some ways. And I think that's kind of at the core of the song too. And I'm like, this album's a fucking rich fucking text. All right. So I'm just fucking reading shit into it. But to me, all that stuff is in there. I think Travis has put all of it in there purposefully. And again, like with Girl O'Clock and Gyroscope, it ends on such a like great little irreverent note where it's like, when I die, I'm going to heaven. Leave it all to the cockroaches in the 7-Elevens, but it'd be nice to think we could get it right down here just once.
And that's just such a great like send off, like just one final middle finger to everything. It's great. Love it. Yeah. Awesome.
100%. And then back and forth. I mean, one thing that's interesting and I think quite apparent is that Travis has said like his writing on this closing track was very heavily inspired by Bob Dylan and trying to write a song like Subterranean Homesick Blues. And I think you can definitely hear that energy in his vocal delivery.
Yep.
And in this the things that he's doing lyrically as well. For a long time, this was, until very recently when Spider in the Snow overtook it, this was my favorite song on this record. I think it's the perfect capstone for this album, if it weren't for that one lyrical passage in The City, this would probably be my favorite lyrics. I mean, particularly the sort of last part of the song, where he's just kind of like, I mean, he's doing this whole like 150 words per minute delivery the whole time,
posting over this instrumental.
Like, and I've always kind of like, because the song is such, because his vocals are like, you know, it's so difficult to take in what he's saying because he's just going so fast, and the band are doing that great like kind of spacious riff that's kind of like stretching across the whole sort of stereo soundscape. And, you know, it's just a real like trip of sounds that actually, when you sit down to read the lyrics, every fucking line on this song is amazing. Like, I can't even pick out like the way it opens with, there's a kind of music that reminds me of you. It's all clear, expensive drinks and shiny shirts and the click of heels as they descend from the taxi like the first foot on the moon. Oh, and it glows with ache. And if it hits me right, oh, it's too much to take. Like the click.
So it's
of
deep
heels,
blue see-through membrane that protects us and connects us, a pulsing cellophane party train scheme that helps us, envelops us, and keeps us locked inside.
Yeah, like the way he builds through these verses to this kind of beautiful sentiment, like we dress to the nines in an attempt to leave it all behind, in search of the moment between the seconds where everything is just fine, that silver thread embedded deep within our spines. Like, I love that. In search of the moment between the seconds where everything is just fine. Like, that's so beautiful. The next part where it's like, I used to be kind of weird about this, a fear of dependence on a guilt-edged hedge transcendence that makes us liars, and tense the fear of looking down and seeing that nothing really suspends us, but it was never just another Saturday night not with you in attendance. The tying between like these cosmic images and these ideas of like, you know, the place of humanity in the universe, and like, you know, a Saturday night where you someone special that you love is there, and all of a sudden, you know, your emotions, like the smallness of you and your relationships, gets contextualized by the hugeness of the universe, but it makes you feel like special as opposed to just, you know, pointless. And it's beautiful. And that chorus is like, it's like, there's so much anxiety and tension and sadness and dourness on this record, but it's like it ends in a place where it's like you accept the chaotic back and forth of the universe. You accept the endless loop of life and the finite nature of your tiny existence in this grand universal speck of everything. And you just, you know, put your hands in the air and wave them like you just don't care. Like, he literally invokes that cliche. And it's like, you know, it's beautiful in this context. And it's like this kind of beautifully freeing surrender. And I can't describe how, like, you know, life affirming that is for an album like this. It's not saying, you know, oh, everything's going to be fine. It's saying it doesn't matter. What matters is the fucking exact moment that you're in right now, making eye contact or holding hands with, or like talking to someone who means a lot to you. All that fucking only thing that matters is that. And we're all going back and forth and back and forth and back on this fucking rock that we're sitting on, and who cares? Like, it's just,
I mean, yeah, it's like everything sucks. It's always gonna suck, but that's okay. Just have a good time, man.
yeah.
Or at least like try to. At least try. And I think that's also a part of this song. It's like, just strive for that, even if you can't have it right now. Just make it happen.
Yeah. And I have no idea how. I mean, we're moving through a phosphorescent gel, a semi-solid self-lit ocean, and it's a funny notion, isn't it? Yeah, but I'm kind of digging it. And it's rigged, and it isn't nearly so big, and it speaks only of its own perpetual near miss, like the uncertain memory of a stranger's mistaken kiss. Like, what a description of like the world and of like, you know, existence of this kind of semi-solid self-lit ocean. Or like, that's obviously a description of the planet, and this notion of you know, life being this kind of like, you know, cosmic joke in a certain sense. I can't even describe why a line like, the world speaks only of its own perpetual near miss, like the uncertain memory of a stranger's mistaken kiss. Like, I don't know what that specifically means word to word, but it's fucking beautiful is what it is in Travis Morrison's own words. And then the very last verse of the song, like, this is where I transcend. So in the end, whatever, we die, we dissolve, equations unbalanced, riddles unsolved, and we were never connected or involved except for the intersections and crazy mathematics with no time and no space and no schedule and no place, and they pass right through us without a trace. And the beautiful end of the song, sometimes that music drifts through my car on a spring night when anything is possible, and I close my eyes and I nod my head and I wonder how you've been, and I count to 110 because you'll always be my hero, even if I never see you again. Like, that's just surrender to the universe. And all that matters is this image of this person that you have, the sound of the music drifting through your car with the windows down. You know,
Yeah.
It means the world to me.
Hell yeah. It's just, that's it. It is what it is. Yeah.
So that's the album, Emergency and I. Every year that passes, this album feels more and more like a part of me, like a part of who I am. As dumb as that might sound, like it feels like it's communicating some thing that I can't put into words. Like I don't need to, because I can just listen. I have the album to do it for me. And as I get older, I'm valuing that in an album more and more than I ever have before.
And I mean, it's just something where personally I don't think Dismemberment Plan or ever made an album that was 3 country miles close to as good as this, but at the same time I don't think they ever needed to. They made this.
I mean, exactly.
They already did this. They owe me nothing.
Yeah, it's like, this is the sort of album that it's a miracle if any band gets to make something that resonates the way that this does, and just all the stars align beautifully, and it gets to then represent this moment in time more than anything else beautifully. Anyway, favorite tracks and ratings: Emergency and I, The Dismemberment Plan. I'll go first. My 3 favorite tracks are Spider in the Snow, The City, and Back and Forth. My least favorite track, if I had to pick one, would be Girl O'Clock, but I've waxed lyrical about how much fun that song is, so it hardly matters. 10 out of 10.
My 3 favorite tracks are The City, Life of Possibilities, and Spider in the Snow. No least favorite. And as you might have imagined, this is a 10.
For me, my 3 favorite tracks are Spider in the Snow, obviously. I'd probably say Memory Machine, and The City. Least favorite is You Are Invited. And I give this a 9 out of 10.
My 3 favorite tracks are What Do You Want Me to Say, The City, and A Life of Possibilities. Least favorite track, yeah, it's probably Girl O'Clock, but that song bangs, so fucking who cares? 9.5.
Hell yeah. That's a 9.6 average from the 4 of us, which I love.
Yes, sir.
That is Emergency and I, and our thoughts on it. If you have any other thoughts you'd like to add, please, your personal experience with this album, anything, let us know in the comments below. We would love to read it, especially for this album and how much it means to us. We want to know what it means to you, or, you know, just anything you think about it in general, what you think of the discussion. We love fan engagement. We're honored if you've listened this far. to our barely, at times barely comprehensible ranting, but yeah, that's this album. It's awesome. It's great. We love it.
Next week on the Record Club, we do Linkin Park's Meteorite.
I think a comparable album in many ways.
I was absolutely a spiritual successor in many respects.
Linkin Park really took up the helm of the kings of math rock.
They passed the torch. Yeah. Thanks for watching. Rock over England.
Keep that
Rock
in
over
mind. I
London.
designed this rhyme to explain in due time that all I know
I will
is time
slap
is a
you
valuable
across
thing.
the mouth with my dick. Shut the fuck up. Rock over London, rock on Chicago, BMW, designed for driving pleasure.